Era frequente o meu marido ter pesadelos horríveis e acordar a gritar com medo. Annie, que tinha mudado de nome para proteger a sua identidade, disse numa entrevista: "Nos últimos anos tenho andado a fugir o perigo de ser assassinada." Expus um campo de concentração escondido dentro do hospital. O incinerador, na Casa da Caldeira, também era usado como forno crematório.
So every day I get a large number of emails relating with human rights violations around the world. So when Annie made her statement, which was published in the Economic Times, I got this story.
Conheci David quando estava a escrever um artigo para o jornal The Epoch Times. Ele tinha dado um discurso em Santa Mónica e parecia muito deslocado por estar aqui, de gabardina, em maio. No entanto, o que me marcou mais foi a sua dedicação incansável à justiça humana. Mantivemos o contacto por e-mail. Sempre que ele escrevia, estava no aeroporto a caminho, ou no regresso de Genebra, ou da Austrália, ou de alguma parte do mundo, sempre a lutar pelos oprimidos.
From an early age, what I wanted to do was to do something about the Holocaust, to try to learn the lessons from it. 4 lessons I've tried to apply from the Holocaust, one of which is bring to justice mass murderers. Second is combating incitement to hatred. A third is protecting refugees. And a fourth is asserting universal human rights values by standing up for victims wherever they are. But it's also very much related to my refugee practice, because I'm a lawyer representing refugee claimants coming from around the world who have these stories of persecution, which then have to be established before an administrative tribunal, and they don't have witnesses, they don't have documents, they don't have forensic proof, they just come with their stories. I was involved in Amnesty International and all sorts of human rights organizations. These organizations do have research departments, but they're very simple research departments. They're not involved in sophisticated analytical research. I'm well used to dealing with this kind of evidentiary vacuum and trying to establish what happened. I've seen lots of burnout. I mean, people just, they get either discouraged or blasé, or they just can't take it. My daily life is mass murder, torture, sexual abuse, and so on. And I mean, unless you approach this dispassionately, you won't be able to deal with it. And I feel that what I can contribute to this, to combat these problems, is analysis, professionalism, a kind of a dispassionate approach, logic. I mean, there's lots of people that are upset and excited, and my getting upset and excited isn't really going to help the issue at all. So I figured, you know, this was something nobody else was going to do. I mean, this fit all these criteria, so I said, yes, okay, sure.
What most people don't realize is that the Chinese regime believes it can get away with almost anything. And that the West doesn't really care about what they do to their own people, so long as their own interests aren't affected.
Every time I would go into town, there would be these people protesting in front of the consulate, day or night, rain or shine. And I got interested in what was going on. I didn't know much about Falun Gong at that point.
Falun Gong is a set of exercises with a spiritual foundation, which was started in 1992 by Li Hongzhi, who began teaching about it. It is a blending and updating of ancient Chinese traditions, of the Qigong, the exercise traditions, the Taoism and Buddhism. I'm not a Falun Gong practitioner, and neither is David Kilgore, and to a certain extent we got involved in this partly because we were outsiders and independent and were able to exercise an independent judgment on this whole issue.
David Matas e David Kilgore publicaram Bloody Harvest, uma investigação minuciosa sobre as alegações de recolha de órgãos realizadas em seguidores de Falun Gong vivos.
It spread throughout China very quickly, because this was after the collapse of the Iron Curtain and the collapse of the Soviet Union and the shift within China from socialism to capitalism, so that there was an ideological vacuum in China. The Falun Gong was actually encouraged initially by the authorities on the basis that it was healthful and it cut down on the health bill in a system which was financially in dire straits because of the extraction of money away from the health system. And it grew from a standing start in 92 until 99, according to government estimates. It was 70 to 100 million practitioners, which was more at the time than the membership of the Communist Party, which was 60 million. And the party at this point took ideological fright and became jealous of the popularity of a movement which was rooted in ancient Chinese traditions. spiritual, totally different from the Communist Party, which was atheist. And the party banned it in '99 out of this jealousy and fear, and has since propagandized against it and has insisted that people abandon the practice. If they find practitioners in China, they arrest them, ask them to recant. If they don't recant, they're tortured. If they don't recant after torture, they're disappeared. And they have become, by far, the #1 torture victims in China. They are detained to this day in the hundreds of thousands in East re-education through labor camps. I was co-chair of the Canadian Helsinki Watch Group, and I basically did an analysis of communism as a root cause of human rights violations. And I went through the communist perspective on human rights and the communist ideology of dictatorship, the proletariat and the leading role of the party. Philosophically, I tried to explain how it generates human rights violations. Ideologically, even though they may mouth the vocabulary of human rights, they don't really think of human rights as belonging to humanity. They think of it as belonging to them. There's a Yuri Andropov who succeeded Brezhnev. He says, any citizen of the Soviet Union whose interests coincide with the interests of society feels the entire scope of our democratic freedoms. It is another matter if those interests do not coincide. Within the revolution, complete freedom. Against the revolution, none. This was the Communist Party when it was socialist. But then what we have is that the Communist Party of China is both communist and capitalist. It's abandoned socialism. Communism was kind of socialism by force, and socialism was the ethic, and communism was the way it was imposed. But remove socialism from the communism equation, there's no ethic at all. It becomes cannibal capitalism. It's cannibalism without the rule of law, cannibalism without ethical structure. Anything to make a buck.
I think that it's vital that the international community come to a better and clearer understanding of the Chinese regime, who they are, what they do, and what they've been doing. There are things that are happening in China which are of enormous historical significance. The persecution of Falun Gong is one of the most horrific, large scale. There were 70 to 100 million Falun Gong practitioners when the persecution started. All of them were instantly put under persecution.
I had never expected to see this in my lifetime.
There's no moral ambiguity. There's no shades of meaning about this. It's an evil crime, and it's happening. I mean, this is the case.
We do know for a fact that there's large-scale executions in China. We do know for a fact that executed prisoners have their organs harvested unwilling, without their consent. We do know for a fact that the Falun Gong are depersonalized, dehumanized, and marginalized, repressed, persecuted, both in word and in deed, in the most vile ways possible.
One of the first people we met with was the wife of a former surgeon, and she told us, I guess this was 2006, she's now a refugee living in the United States. She told us that her husband, during the period 2001-2003, had removed the corneas from the eyes of approximately 2,000 Falun Gong practitioners. Their corneas would be removed, then they're unconscious at this point. They'd be taken into another room, and their heart, lung, all their vital organs would be removed for sale purposes.
我的前夫曾经参与过摘除法轮功学员器官的手术，他是一名脑外科医生。参与摘除法轮功学员眼角膜手术，包括部分在法轮功学员活体上摘除眼角膜。我的家人告诉我说，他说你不知道我有多么痛苦，因为这些法轮功学员是活的。事情都是秘密进行的，我们医院参与的医生很多是从其他医院调过来的实习医生。这些人的器官被摘除以后，有的人就直接被丢进焚尸炉中火化，没有留下任何痕迹。
What lawyers and courts do is you get in all the evidence, and then you make a conclusion after you've heard all the evidence based on all the evidence. What I was faced with this was a methodological problem. It happens in an operating room, no public access, clean up immediately afterwards, no crime scene. People are killed, bodies cremated, no corpses, no victims, and nobody to testify about what happened to them. We started setting up trails of proof and trails of disproof. Let's get on all the evidence and see where it leads.
Quando analisamos os factos que rodeiam esta questão, a conclusão torna-se difícil de negar. Um dado importante a considerar é o tempo. O tempo médio de espera por órgãos viáveis é bastante longo, pois os órgãos adequados a transplante devem vir de pessoas saudáveis. Consequentemente, o tempo médio de espera por um coração é de 8 meses, por um fígado é de 26 meses e por um rim é de 37 meses.